In the last screencast, we compared the visible information on a page from Rotten Potatoes with the HTML source that came from the server. And one of the things we noticed was that certain HTML elements had attributes associated with them. For example, here's a table element that has an ID attribute whose value is movies. And here is an H1, or top-level heading element. It has a class attribute whose value is title. In this screencast, we're going to take a look at two specific kinds of attributes, the ID and class attributes, which are special because they can be used to connect visual style information to elements on the page to control how the web browser will display different kinds of text and graphics. Once again, we're going to use Firefox's developer toolbar to help us out here. In particular, under the information menu, we're going to turn on display element information. And I'm just going to move this little floating window out of the way. But now, whenever we hover the mouse over an element on the page, Firefox will draw a red box around not only the element, but everything that's nested inside of it. And in fact, if you look at this web developer information bar up here, you'll see, for example, that when I'm hovered over this table, I can see that right now my mouse is hovered over a TH, or table heading element, which is nested inside of a TR, or table row element. That, in turn, is inside of a T-head, or table header element, and so on, all the way up to HTML, which is the very top level. And if we compare this with our HTML markup, sure enough, we can see that the table header element that I was hovered over, movie title, is nested inside of TR and inside of T-head, table, and so forth, exactly matching what I see in the web developer information bar up here. So, turning our attention to two specific kinds of attributes of interest. Taking a look at the table, we see that it has an ID attribute whose value is movies. When we hover over something that is nested inside that table, look at the web developer information bar and you'll see table # movies. That's because the # is a notation that means the element whose ID attribute has this value. So a table whose ID attribute is movies will show up in the web developer bar as table # movies. Similarly, here's an example of an H1, or top-level header, which has a class attribute, the value of which is title. Now, this is the Rotten Potatoes header that's at the top of each page, and if I hover over it, you'll see that it's reported as h1.title in the web developer info bar. That's because the dot is a notation that means an element whose class attribute has a specific value. So in this case, the h1 element whose class is title. In the next screencast, we'll see how the class and ID attributes can be used to tell the browser how to associate visual style information with different elements on the page. But for the purposes of this screencast, you've seen how you can use the display element information feature of Firefox to hover over an element, see where that element is in the overall hierarchy of the page, and see whether that element has a class or ID attribute attached to it.